In the next few minutes, I want to explore some of the relational issues around welfare and set out three sort of broad issues that might help your reflections. The first is around what we think about the goals of welfare, what we're trying to achieve. Secondly, around the nature of responsibility for welfare provision, what are the boundaries of mutual responsibility and obligation. And thirdly, some broader reflections about the nature of the economy and the society we build, which maximises the scope for providing welfare, but also minimises the generation of welfare needs. But first, thinking about some of the goals of welfare. One UK politician recently raised the question, is welfare just poverty plus £1? Is it simply about lifting people above some potentially fairly arbitrary threshold of minimal income? Or is it a much broader vision for the flourishing of individuals and families and households? And what might that flourishing look like? I think that question gets added force, certainly in the West, in the recognition that over many decades we've pursued policies of redistribution, yet still have many households and families trapped in welfare dependency and actually living in many cases quite squalid and miserable lives, that social mobility has stalled, that people's life chances are still determined very largely by the circumstances of their birth and the nature of their families. So there is that sense that progress has not been made, at least to an extent that matches the growth and prosperity of the nation as a whole. So in that context, what might we mean by relational poverty and therefore a broader vision of relational welfare? Part of that comes down to more recent interest in concepts of well-being and human flourishing, so that broader vision of what it means to grow and flourish as a person, and seeing welfare as expanding that possibility, not just for individuals, but for communities as a whole. Second, it means looking more closely at the nature of life chances for children. What is it that gives a child the chance to grow and flourish? And if we want every child in our society to have that opportunity, what are the conditions that we would need to make that possible? And there that forces us to look at, for example, the implications of the parenting that children receive, and the implications of that for their cognitive development, their learning, their education, the development of character, and all the soft relational skills that are increasingly important for success. So providing welfare is a broader vision about meeting those goals and opportunities. But in the end, it's also about building relationships, that the old person who lives alone, who is lonely and isolated and vulnerable, however much money they have, haven't truly received welfare. So if we broaden the goals of welfare, that also forces us to think a little bit more about how it's provided and delivered, and whose responsibility for that. And that raises, I think, a fundamental question of political philosophy. Is our primary relationship as individuals to the state? Is it the state's responsibility to provide me with welfare, whether that's a pension in old age, whether that's income support in unemployment, whether that's help if I am ill or disabled? But is that relationship primarily between me and the state, and is that governed by an account of my rights and my entitlements? Or are there responsibilities that we have firstly for ourselves, but secondly for members of our families, for relatives, for our wider community? Where does primary responsibility lie? So if I think, for example, about my elderly mother, is it the state's responsibility to care for her, and I as a son may choose to fulfill responsibilities to her? Or actually, do I have a duty? Does the state believe that I have a duty, and does the state act to complement that responsibility? Looking across the globe, societies have very different views about where that primary responsibility lies. It also raises questions around responsibility that people have. That comes to the crunch when people start to think about what conditions are applied to the provision of welfare benefits. What duties do people have to seek work or to care for their children appropriately? What sanctions might be applied if people fail to fulfill those responsibilities? And the great risk here that we have is that some sense of social solidarity breaks down. If in the end too many people who pay taxes believe that they're paying them for the benefit of others, then that relationship breaks down. So what is that sense of the social contract that actually binds a society together, that people feel, in a true sense, that they are all in it together, that there is a system which works for the benefit of all and which all are happy to contribute to. And there, as Christians, in a sense, one might look back to the sense of what did it mean for the society of Israel, the nation of Israel, to regard every member as a brother, and therefore to have some kind of tie and bond of obligation. But looking then more broadly beyond that, certainly in Western countries, there has been an approach to the economy and to society to pursue growth at all costs and then to pick up the pieces. That welfare and economic policy, in a sense, have been different priorities. But now we're beginning to see some of the limits and the consequences of that, that if welfare needs become too great, that starts to create a brake on economic growth. So it raises wider questions about the nature of our economy. How do we structure the economy in ways that minimise the generation of welfare needs and maximise our capacity to provide welfare by protecting those range of institutions, and particularly the family and the community, ensuring that they are capable of meeting the welfare needs of the others. Now, other sessions in these discussions will have touched on some of those needs in terms of the nature of capitalism, the role of interest in the economy, how we look at the lessons of the Jubilee land laws and the ban on interest. But those, in a sense, are important background for debating how we meet welfare needs in society today.